Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Dr. Sem Yankees Show. Our program every week is brought to you by Artemisia Publishing. You can find this wonderful traditional publisher at apbooks.net. Artemisia publishes a wide variety of books in a wide variety of genres, including a number of books that I wrote. For example, The Least Among Them, an award-winning book about the players who played only one game in their entire major league career, with that game being on the Yankees. Artemisia also published From Compton to the Bronx, Roy White's autobiography, written with me. And they also published a wonderful book titled 365.2, Going the Distance, A Runner's Journey. And that book documents my life in a way in 2022 when I decided to run every single day for a calendar year. The book is about setting goals and working hard to reach them. Running is the metaphor, but it's not a book about running. And the great news is I have a book that will come out probably within a year. I can give you a general sense. It has something to do about the New York Yankees. And Artemisia will be publishing that book as well. So check out their wide selection of great books at apbooks.net. Also, take the time to come to Start Spreading the News, found at startspreadingthenews.blog. We publish Yankee news, Yankee articles, original content every single day. We put articles up at 6 a.m., 10 a.m., and 2 p.m., and we've been doing that every single day since 2017. No one in the business does it better than us. We are the best. We are the most original. And if you haven't seen Start Spreading the News yet, you are missing out on an awful lot. So I thought today might be a fun day to do something a little bit different. I'm going to explore something in real time with all of you. I have a hypothesis. Now, listen, you know I've been an educator in public schools and colleges for, I don't know, it's got to be 35 years now. If you count when I was a substitute, we're really talking like 37 years that I've been involved as a professional, as an employee in public schools, from all grades, ranging from kindergarten through collegiate. And I think I know a little bit about what a hypothesis is supposed to be. It's an educated guess. And then you test the hypothesis to see if there's a conclusion. And so my hypothesis, we'll find out if I'm right, is that most of the times when a Yankee wins the MVP award, the Yankees themselves are also the champions of baseball. If a Yankee wins the MVP, the end result, this is my hypothesis, is most often a world championship. Have there been years that a Yankee has won the MVP and the Yankees haven't been the world champions? Yes. But I think those are very rare. Have there been years when the Yankees have an MVP and they don't even make it to the World Series? I think that's been even rarer, and it's more a recent phenomenon than something that was part of the Yankee past. But I thought it might be fun if we just sat here and talked about Yankee MVP winners, one by one, since the beginning of time, or since the beginning of when it really mattered, when the first Yankees and then the rest won the MVP. So we can make this a little game. Get a piece of paper out, and I'll say the year. You write the year down, and then write down who you think is the MVP, and then write down who you think won the World Series that year. And we'll see how correct you can be. You ready? The first Yankee MVP came in 1923. That person's name was, write it quickly, George Herman Ruth. That's right, the old babe, the Bambino. And in 1923, the Yankees won the World Series. That was their first World Championship after not winning the World Series in 1921 and 1922. That was also the year, I believe, Yankee Stadium opened. They played the New York Giants all 3 of those years. The first 2 years, they played the home and away games in the same stadium, the Polo Grounds, because that's where the Yankees played. And then the Giants got mad that the Yankees were out drawing them, as the story goes, so the Yankees built Yankee Stadium across the river. And that was 1923. First player to hit a home run in Yankee Stadium was Babe Ruth, of course. So far we have 1 MVP award winner and 1 world championship. The next Yankee to win an MVP came in 1927. Who do you think was the MVP that year? Well, that year it was not Babe Ruth, believe it or not. Back then, I'm not quite sure when the official MVP award became the MVP award. We go back and offer an analysis and say guys who won various awards over those years are considered the MVP, but they tried not to give it to the same guy more than once. That was true for at least a period. And so in 1927, the MVP was not Babe Ruth. It was Henry Louis Gehrig, the pride of the Yankees, the Iron Horse. And in 1927, we do know that the Yankees went to the World Series and won. All right, so far we're 2 for 2 with MVPs and Yankee championships. The next Yankee to win the MVP doesn't happen until 1936. And this time we have a guy repeating as MVP, Lou Gehrig. That's his last MVP, but he won it. And in 1936, the Yankees won the World Series. So 3 MVPs, and 3 World Championships. The next Yankee to win the MVP came in 1939. And in 1939, the MVP of the American League was Joseph Paul DiMaggio. And in 1939, the World Series champion was the New York Yankees. So now, my hypothesis is so far right on. 4 MVPs, 4 World Championships. Can we make it 5 straight? We can. 1941, the MVP of the American League was Joe DiMaggio. And in 1941, the Yankees won the World Series. We are now 5 for 5. In 1942, this one's a little harder. There was an MVP. It was not Joe DiMaggio, but he was a Yankee. In 1942, the MVP of the American League, Joe Gordon, who was later traded to the Indians for Allie Reynolds. And in 1942, the Yankees lost the World Series to the St. Louis Cardinals. So now we're 5 World Series wins, 1 World Series loss, but every time a Yankee has won the MVP, they've at least gone to the World Series. The next year, the MVP, 1943. Do you think you know? How well do you know the New York Yankees? 1943 was a pitcher, an amazing pitcher who most people don't remember. I'm going to pull up his statistics real quickly just to give you an unbelievable look at this pitcher. One of the great winning percentages of all time in Yankee history. He pitched, where's the number? 211 games. He went 109 and 43. 109 wins, only 43 losses. His lifetime winning percentage, 717. And he was the MVP of 1943. And in 1943, the New York Yankees were world champions. I'm almost certain. I'm going to check. In 1943, the Yankees got the revenge on the St. Louis Cardinals, and they were world champions. So now we have 6 world championships, 1 World Series loss, 7 MVPs, 6 out of 7. A year the Yankees won the World Series. The next MVP comes in 1947. That was the great DiMaggio once again. And in 1947, the Yankees won the World Series. That's 7 out of 8. The next year was 1950 when a Yankee won an MVP. Do you know who the 1950 MVP was? I'll give you a hint. His middle name was Francis. What kind of hint is that? I'll give you another hint. He then became a Yankee broadcaster for decades. Holy cow, that's correct. Phil Rizzuto. And in 1950, the Yankees definitely won the World Series. In 1951, the MVP was a Yankee. And in 1951, the MVP's name was Lawrence Peter Berra, otherwise known as Yogi. And in 1951, the Yankees won the World Series. So that makes 9 out of 10. That's a great hypothesis so far, right? All those years in education, learning about how to make an educated guess seems to have me on the right path. 10 years, 9 out of 10 times, the first 10 Yankees to win MVPs. Those awards came 9 times. Out of those 10 times, the Yankees went on to win the World Series when they had a player who was good enough to win the MVP. Interesting. But let's continue because we have what's known as an outlier. The year 1954, the player, Yogi Berra, MVP. The Yankees went to the World Series in 1949, 1950, 1951, 1952, and 1953. They won 5 in a row. But 1954, even though they won over 100 games, they did not make it to the World Series. The Cleveland Indians won 111 games. The Yankees finished 8 games back. The Indians went to the World Series, played a team from New York anyway. New York was represented every year, I believe, yes, throughout the 1950s. It was the New York Giants who won the World Series in 1954. That was the year that Willie Mays made his famous over-the-shoulder catch, maybe, possibly, the greatest catch in baseball history. But now we have our first non-World Series Yankee team with an MVP. Then, the very next year, Yogi Berra wins his 3rd MVP award. Happens to be his last, but his 3rd. That was 1955. The Yankees went to the World Series, but they lost. That was the year. The Bums, the Boys of Summer. Johnny Padres helps pitch the Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, to their greatest moment ever. Just a few years later, they'd move, but the Dodgers won the 1955 World Series. Brings us to 1956, and another Yankee winning the MVP. Now, in 1956, the MVP was a guy from Commerce, Oklahoma, named Mickey Charles Mantle. And once again, we have a Yankee World Series champion. So we have 13 MVPs, 10 World Series championships. But my hypothesis, not quite as strong anymore. When it was 9 out of 10, it was coming true 90% of the time. I'm not at 90% of the time anymore when it's 10 out of 13. Mantle wins the MVP award the very next year, 1957. And I'm just going to check, but I don't believe the Yankees won the World Series in 1957. I think it was the Milwaukee Braves. True, I'm right. The Braves won the World Series in 1957. The Yankees would get their revenge the very next year, but we have our 3rd Yankee team that went to the World Series and lost. So 14 MVP winners, 10 times when the Yankee won an MVP, the Yankees won the World Series. 3 times they went to the World Series and lost. 1 time they didn't even make it to the World Series. So we get to 1960. Roger Maris wins the World Series. I probably should have given you a little more time there. I didn't give you any time. The Pirates won the World Series. So my hypothesis, falling apart right now, much weaker. That's the 4th Yankee team to reach and not win the World Series. So 1961 rolls around, and there is a Yankee who wins the MVP. The MVP award winner in 1961 was Roger Maris. He won back-to-back MVPs, and in 1961, the Yankees got back finally to winning a World Series. 1962 rolls around. Do you know the MVP in the American League in 1962? That was Mickey Mantle. That was the last time he would win an MVP award, his third. And in 1962, the Yankees won the World Series. Brings us to 1963. This is not Mantle. This is not Maris. And Whitey Ford never won an MVP. Do you know who was the American League MVP award winner in 1963? Elston Howard. Elston Howard was the MVP award winner, and the Yankees did go to the World Series, but they lost. That's the fifth time they have an MVP award winner, and they are World Series losers. They don't have another MVP or World Series. Well, they made it in 64, but they go through a dark period. The late 60s, early 70s, the Yankees finally get back to the World Series in 1976. They finally also get an MVP award winner in 1976, Thurman Munson. But in 1976, the Yankees lost the World Series. So that's now six. 6 times the Yankee has won an MVP, and the Yankees have went on to lose the World Series. But of 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 World Series, MVP winners, out of 19 of them, the Yankees went to the World Series 18 of those first 19 years. And then things, well, they don't go quite as well. Who won the MVP award in 1985? Do you know? That was Donald Arthur Mattingly, one of my favorite players of all time, Don Mattingly. The Yankees did not reach the World Series in 1985. And then the Yankees go 95. They don't get an MVP award winner for 20 years till 2005. Do you know the name of the person who won the MVP in 2005? The MVP award winner in 2005 was Alex Rodriguez. And the world champions in 2005 were the Chicago White Sox. So the Yankees, again, not making the World Series. So that other part of my hypothesis was the fact that the Yankees would get World Series winners and not necessarily make it to the World Series, being a more recent type of situation, is coming true. The Yankees had an MVP award winner in 2007. In 2007, the Red Sox went to the World Series, and the Red Sox beat the Colorado Rockies, and the MVP was A-Rod again, but the Yankees didn't make the World Series. Then in 2022, Aaron Judge is the MVP. The Yankees did not make the World Series. That's the 5th time that happened. And then, just a few days ago, 2024, Aaron Judge, again, the MVP award winner. The Yankees made it to the World Series and lost. So by my count, we have 5, 10, 15, 24 Yankees who have won the MVP. Not 24 different players, 24 different times a Yankee has won the MVP. Of those 24 times, 12 times the Yankees were world champions. So I think that disproves my hypothesis that most times when the Yankees had an MVP, they also went on to win the World Series. It was only half the time. Now, another 7 times, making it 19 out of 24, the Yankees reached the World Series. So the percentage for Yankees reaching the World Series in MVP seasons is 79%. That's sort of, I think, supports the hypothesis that most times when a Yankee player wins the MVP, the team goes on to the World Series. Had that been my hypothesis, that would have been, I think you could say, proven correctly. And then 5 times out of 24, the Yankees failed to reach the World Series, and 5/24 is basically 21%. So those are your numbers, 21% of the time, but really only recently. The 5 times that a Yankee has won the MVP and the Yankees didn't go to the World Series were Aaron Judge in 2022, A-Rod in 2007, A-Rod in 2005, Mattingly in 1985, and then all the way back to 1954 when the Yankees were great and Yogi Berra won it anyway. So that's interesting. I want to go back to the Yogi Berra year, 1954. His WAR, according to Baseball Reference, 5.3. The voting, as I go to the list here, Larry Doby actually had a higher WAR. He out-homered Yogi, 32-22. He out-RBI'd Yogi, 126-125. But Yogi hit 307 compared to Larry Doby's 272. And even though Doby helped propel the Indians to the World Series, Berra got the MVP. Now, you want to have some fun with statistics. Bobby Avila of the Cleveland Indians, who came in third in the voting, his WAR that year, 7.1. Avila hit 341 that year to lead the American League. But he didn't lead the American League in WAR. This is amazing. They didn't have WAR back then. The player who led the American League in WAR in 1954 with 8.2 WAR batted .320 with 19 homers, 116 runs batted in, 18 stolen bases. He had an OPS of 946. That was Minnie Minoso. In 1954, the runner-up in WAR was Ted Williams. Teddy Ballgame hit .345, 29 homers, 89 ribbies. He walked 136 times. In 1954, Ted Williams' on-base percentage was .513. He was on base more than half of the amount of times he had at-bats. More than half of the amount of times that Teddy Ballgame came up, he was on base. That's just unheard of. It's absurd. Mickey Mantle also had a higher WAR that year than Yogi Berra. Mantle's WAR was 6.9. He hit 327 home runs, 102 ribbies. Listen to this. He led the American League in runs scored with 129. Then Steve Gromek of Detroit, who got only 1 vote, had 6 WAR. I would have to, he's a pitcher, so we'd have to dig deep into his numbers, and it doesn't really work. Let's just quickly pull up his numbers here because it doesn't really work. 1954, because you're comparing a pitcher to hitters. He went 18-16, 2.74. He pitched 252.2 innings, and he got 1 vote for the MVP. Then Larry Doby, who we talked about, then Early Wynn, another pitcher for Cleveland with 5.5 WAR. And then there finally was Yogi Berra with 5.3 WAR. So that's interesting. Yogi did not have like a super outstanding year by WAR, but they really back then looked at catchers. Roy Campanella of the Dodgers won a whole host of MVP awards as well, while not necessarily having the greatest statistics, because they saw the catcher as the field general, the guy who really runs the team. And Yogi's reputation was so stellar that he won 3 MVPs while not necessarily being the best player in the league in any of those years, interestingly enough. That's what actually, if you haven't seen the Yogi Berra movie made by his granddaughter, Lindsay Berra, which came out probably about 3 or 4 years ago at this point, if you haven't seen that movie, it's really worth watching. Yogi Berra has become legendary more for the things he said or didn't say than for the fact that he was one of the greatest baseball players, maybe of all time, at least if you look at catchers. And he's now basically his great baseball accomplishments have been somewhat obscured by the fact that he had this larger than life personality and he said a lot of funny things. And Lindsay makes a movie about her grandpa that really shows what an amazing baseball player he was. It's, if you haven't seen the Yogi Berra documentary, if you get a chance, I'm not sure where you can get it, Netflix or whatever. Every now and again, baseball museums show the movie. There's places that rent out space and they show the Yogi movie. If you get a chance, check it out because it's really good. And if you get a chance, check out Artemisia Publishing at apbooks.net. A ton of great books, including another Yankee book from me coming next fall. And of course, check out the great Yankee site, start spreading the news.blog. So this was the Dr. Sem Show. I thought it was pretty fun. We made a hypothesis. Well, we didn't. I did. And it didn't come as true as I thought it would. I thought it would be a preponderance of times that a Yankee won the MVP that the Yankees went on to win the World Series. It was a preponderance that when a Yankee wins the MVP that the team goes to the World Series. That's true. Looks like it's 19 out of 24, 79%. There have only been 5 Yankee World's MVP award winners when the team didn't go to the World Series. So that was fun. Sometimes it's fun to come up with an idea and then let it play out in real time and see where the data takes us. What is true is in the beginning when the Yankees won MVPs, the team went to and won the World Series. And then over time, that seemed to happen fewer and fewer times. So anyway, thank you for watching. Check us out at Start Spreading the News. Articles every day at 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 2 o'clock. Check out all the other great program here on the Northeast Streaming or the National Streaming Sports programming. And have yourselves a most wonderful and terrific Thanksgiving. Enjoy the entire holiday. And you know what? I'm thankful for you. Have a great day.